Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. Today is the first episode for 2023 on a series about growing in containers or growing in vertical towers. Vertical towers are a great way to save space because you're growing straight up, and that's a little, really 2 foot by 2 foot footprint. I'm affiliated with GreenStalk Garden. That's where the tower came from if you want to check out the video description. I'm growing in fabric pots. They're durable. These have sat out for the last 3 years. Lightweight, inexpensive. This is a 4-gallon fabric pot, 10-gallon. The one back there is a 20-gallon, and the bigger one right there is a 100-gallon. I sell these at my seed shop. You can use any container you want for the series. Today we're going to talk about refreshing container soil that's about 3 years old. What do you do with it? We're going to talk about filling these the most inexpensive way if you're just getting started. So I'm going to refresh all the soil in the tower. We're going to refresh some of the soil in here. We'll talk about basic fertilizing and setup. And you already see that I have some stuff going in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is really clear out everything that I don't want. We'll start with prepping the containers that I'm not going to be dumping the soil out with some fertilizer, some compost. And I'll just take you through the whole process. My whole goal is to show you a lot of ways to fill these based on you guys having different budgets, different amendments available to you, and you can just kind of use what I'm teaching you as principles. Now, before we get started, I want to go over and talk about composting. As new gardeners or gardeners that haven't started composting, and I know not everybody has the space, you really want to start to compost. And I recommend that nowadays is the first thing that you build before you even build your gardens, because it's going to pay dividends going forward. You're going to just save a ton of money in the costs of compost, bagged soil product, and all of that. So let's go take a quick look at what I have set up for composting. You can start with something like this. This is a 4x4 pen that I got on Amazon years ago. Everything in here is about 4 years old. I've already been digging it out. I just throw in soil, debris, all kinds of stuff, bags of grass clippings, leaves sometimes, and it's just wonderful stuff in there to fill up my containers. I would take this out, mix it with a little bit, maybe some other compost, some peat moss. It's the perfect soil. It's free, loaded with compost. Compost is going to give your plants a nice low nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, well below a 111 NP and K, but it continually feeds the soil life, holds water. It's great stuff. And this is the simplest way to do it. Just throw your stuff in here. Maybe you can't use it in a year, maybe not even 2 years, but it's going to start breaking down and you're going to be able to just take it and use it where you want. This is my hot composting station. So it's the end of March. This is a pile that kind of cooled down. I just mixed in some fresh grass clippings. It's heating up. For instance, it's 45 degrees right now, and that is approaching, let's get it in focus, 100, there we go, 120 degrees. Hot composting speeds up the breakdown process. Right over here is pretty much, it's called cold composting. You're just throwing everything in there and slowly over time it breaks down. This can be ready in 6 months. I use 2 spaces. I just turn it, rotate it sometimes from one side to the other side, really get air into there, help it break down quickly. And as it gets to be more broken down, it goes over here and then it ends up looking just like that. That is just wonderful compost that you can really just plant directly in. And then in the other parts I'll show you throughout the series, I'm really creating leaf mold, which is called leaf compost, and it's basically a pen like this. It's just leaves. You can throw in some grass if you want to heat it up, speed it up a little bit. This becomes wonderful stuff. And this is just a 4 foot by 4 foot pen also. Just throw your leaves in there, forget about it. The biggest issue people have with composting is they just don't get started. I will put the build in, or I will put the video in that just shows you how to build this. All right, let's get to the containers. Fabric pots are inexpensive, but buying bags of potting soil can be really expensive. If you're buying it in the bags, the big box stores, you're paying top dollar basically for the same stuff. So don't overpay for it. Nothing there is really better than another potting mix. For instance, if they all say potting mix, one's $5 more, it's not really any different. You don't need to buy anything with fertilizer in it. We're going to be fertilizing it. So these plants, except for the peas, have overwintered. I'm going to be clearing them out. So the soil in here is on its 3rd year. It's pretty good. It's a bigger 100 gallons. I'm not going to dump all this out, but we'll be going over in this video how to just amend this with some compost, some organic granular fertilizer. I'll teach you what that's about, and that's going to just fluff this up. And basically, you know, you're going to be doing what I'm doing here with a shovel, a hand shovel. But we're going to be mixing in some compost into the top 4 to 6 inches. That's perfect for anything we're planting in here because plants put out surface roots and deeper roots. We'll water it in with a water-soluble fertilizer. Water-soluble fertilizer is immediately available to your plant. We'll be covering that too in future videos. So this looks pretty good. I've already cleared it out, so I'm just going to loosen it up, get it ready for planting. Turnips, I'm going to eat these greens. I'll be cutting them out. Same thing. The soil in here is pretty good. These beds are relatively new, nice and healthy. If you were going to be filling these containers for the first time, again, you could buy any potting mix. I will link a video in the video description that goes over all the different bag products so you know what you're buying. That's the most expensive way. The least expensive way is to make it yourself. And again, convenience, you buy it in the potting mix bags, save money, you make it yourself out of amendments and products you can buy at the big box stores. We'll go over that in a second. If you really want to save money, you start composting, and that's what you use for your garden. Let's go over to a basic all-purpose mix. This is an all-purpose garden mix that I make. This is perfect for containers. It's made out of 3 products that you would buy at the big box stores. Rather than buying a bag of potting mix that is basically the ingredients you see right here and paying twice as much for it, you can buy 3 basic products. You can buy shredded hardwood, which are all these little bits. Most of your potting mix has shredded hardwood in there. It is a bale of peat moss, and it's a bag or 2 of leaf compost or leaf mold. Here in Maryland, there's a product called Leaf Grow. It's a wonderful compost to add into your amendments. You can use any bagged compost. So 3 ingredients: peat moss, bagged compost, bagged shredded hardwood. Mix it together. You can use this anywhere in your garden. I will link the video that shows you exactly how to make this. This is really useful in that you can use it anywhere in your garden. It's inexpensive and it saves you a lot of money. This is probably the most inexpensive way to buy it if you're buying bagged products. Another way to get pretty decent stuff is to check with your local landscape companies and see what they have for garden soil. You have to check it out, make sure it's quality. But the mix of peat moss, compost, and shredded hardwood makes this nice and loose. It's going to hold water. It's perfect for your containers. The reason that I'm stressing really bag products, making your own all-purpose soil, composting, that is the most expensive part of gardening. It's bringing in the amendments and setting up your garden that costs a fortune. So I want to just give you a lot of ways to save some money. All right, so you have a general idea of different ways you can fill the containers. Let's get to taking care of them. This is an organic granular fertilizer. Comes dry, little rainwater got into there. And it's basically chicken manure, blood meal, bone meal. All the bag products are essentially the same. I recommend looking for something that costs you less than $2 a pound. You just kind of have to do the math. You're looking for any ratio, that's a 5-3-3, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, N, P, and K. Something around there, you know, up or down a couple numbers is fine. You can follow the instructions if you want. You can't really overdo putting down this organic granular. It's a slow release. It has to break down. Soil microbiology has to work with it, break it down, get the N, P, and K into a form your plant can use. So this is going to feed over the season, and I heavily put it down right across the top. If you have compost, I would put down 1 inch or 2 along with this, because you want to set your beds up with everything they need. When you're growing in containers, there's a limited amount of nutrition in there, fertilizer, N, P, and K. So whatever you grow really sucks the life out of there. So you want to replace it. So heavily handed, we're putting in the slow release organic fertilizer. We'll get to the compost in a second, and I would just go through, and you want to loosen this really to a depth of 4 to 6 inches and just loosen it up. All the plants that you grow, just about all of them, will send out surface roots When it rains, the NP and K will get washed down to the lower parts of this. We're also going to water this in with a water-soluble fertilizer. You can use fish emulsion. I recommend AgroThrive. I'm associated with them. That's in the video description. Water-soluble means that NP and K is in a form the plants can use right away. So I would just soak it in now, let rain, whatever, wash it down. And when you put your plants in, it's going to have NP and K ready right away. It's going to have this slow release breaking down over the months, and we're going to have compost in there. So let me finish just loosening this up, and then we'll get to the compost. If you have it, it's great stuff to use. This is compost I made, so I'm not spending any money. The beauty of compost is that it feeds worms, soil life, holds water, feeds the plants, and it's free. So we're going to take this over to that larger container. And a larger container, obviously you can't dump out 100 gallons and refresh it. But because it's so large, it stays moist. An ecosystem really does form in there. It's enough soil that it's filled with worms. So, and here's a worm right in here that we're adding. As you're putting compost on that top, 4 inches or so, working it in, worms will take all the good stuff up top, pull it down to the bottom of the container, so you don't really have to dump out those 100-gallon containers. Smaller containers, the 4-gallon, the 10-gallon, the 20-gallon, yeah, you just dump it out, you refresh it, you put it all back in. So let's go take care of that, adding some beautiful worms and compost. This container is already looking pretty good, and there are some worms all over the place. So again, we're not going to go and dump out all this every couple of years. We're just going to be adding compost, fresher soil, etc. to the top. And that's all you really have to do. The worms will take what's up here, pull it down to the bottom of the container. It does really, really well. This is a big enough space for worms to live and do their thing. And then you would want to just kind of work the new stuff into the top 2-4 inches, and the large containers are ready to go. All right, let's do a container in the vertical tower and one of the smaller containers. I'll show you how to set it up if you were doing it fresh, and then also how to amend the soil. This is a 10-gallon container. Again, I sell these at my seed shop. Check out the video description. So if I set this up, it was only a year or two old, what I would do is take a big handful like this of organic granular fertilizer. Again, some rain got into there. Sprinkle it across the top, work it into the top 4 inches, put in some compost, work it in just like I showed you. But let's just say we're at year 3. After 3 years, for the smaller containers, I recommend refreshing it. Now, once I dump it out, we're going to pretend it's a brand new container. These are actually celery roots. Part of the reason that I like fabric pots is you can see that the root systems can grow into the ground and even better support the plant depending on what you're growing. And it looks like actually that the celery survived. So I will collect the roots out of here and see what I can grow, which is kind of cool. All right, everything is cleared out. So if it was a brand new pot, you're either buying a potting mix from the store, filling it up, get it set up. Or you made your own, you're filling it up, you're getting it set up. This is old, this is about 3 years old, so I dump it out and I just mix this with 50% of the all-purpose mix I make, or you can mix it with 50% peat moss if you want to just buy peat moss. Mix it together, refill the container. Let me show you that process. So I just mixed what I dumped out of the container with some of my all-purpose mix. Again, you could be doing your container mix you dumped out, half compost if you have it, or half peat moss if you have it, or 25% peat moss, 25% compost, but you get the idea. It's the material that came out of your container, that's going to be 50%, with the same size amount of all-purpose mix, potting mix, peat moss, compost, however you want to make it. So you get a 50-50. Blend it together, everything is good. At this point, what I'll do is I'll fill it halfway, throw in a handful of organic granular, fill it again, another handful of organic granular, this container set up. It looks something like this. Fill it halfway, organic granular, mix it all the way through to the bottom, and then fill to the top. Maybe leave like an inch in case you want to use mulch to conserve water in there. Fill it almost to the top. Another handful of the organic granular, and it can really again be any organic granular. Just because it says pepper tone or flower tone or made for tomatoes, the plants don't know the difference. You're just looking for something that fits your budget and has N, P, and K represented. This is good to go. So let me just pick this up. We'll take it over to the garden. It's back in its spot. If you wanted, you could add some compost, an inch, mix it in. Again, leaving some space up here so that we can put some mulch on here. That will help the container contain moisture for the plant when the heat of the summer comes. Setting up the tiers of the vertical tower is the same exact process, but let's break that down and fill one of those. Each tier just lifts off and restacks. It's really, really stable. I love growing in this system. So these have some herbs in there. They're going to get divided up and put elsewhere. This is some of that older soil. We're going to take this one and we're going to fill it up and refresh it. So again, I want to stress how you're filling the container. It's brand new. You can buy a bag of potting mix from the big box stores, fill it in there. You would put in your organic granular in a similar way that I've been showing you so that it has fertilizer in there. You can make your own all-purpose mix. Cheaper way to do it, put it in there. This is what I dumped out. You don't have to throw away your old container mix. That gets really, really expensive. So you want to break it up, get rid of any weeds, roots, anything like that. And we know that all this fit into there. Two parts. One part, the old container mix. The other part can be the all-purpose mix, as I've talked about. It could just be compost that you have. It could just be peat moss. It could be a combination of any of that. What you're doing is it's 50% this, and then the same size over here becomes 50%. The same size pile over here becomes 50%. So it's 50% old, 50% new, blend it together, fill your container halfway, organic granular, fill it the rest of the way, organic granular. When you're filling up these vertical towers from GreenStalk Garden, you want to go really all the way up to the top here. So make sure that you bring the soil up to there. When you're making the 50-50 mix, 50 old, 50 new, you're going to have extra soil. So you can use this to fill new containers. Just don't throw it away. You don't have to throw it away. You can just refresh it. Now, I know it does get a little bit confusing with all these choices. I wanted to give you multiple ways to create a potting mix, an all-purpose mix. Bottom line is you want it to have organic matter in there. You want it to have peat moss or compost, combination of both, a little bit shredded hardwood, even though shredded hardwood's not necessarily the best for containers, but all your potting mix that you're buying has some in there. You want your container mix to be loose, hold water, have nutrients, and you can grow just about anything in there. All right, let me set this up. We'll go back to the container garden there, talk about what's next. Here's another way to refresh a container. You know, this is part of the vertical system, so I removed some of the soil. If this was only a year or two old, you know, I wouldn't necessarily have to dump all of it out. But if it's a container like this, or the 20-gallon container over there, you can take some of the soil out of the top, take your organic granular, and looking at this now, this is actually, well, let me sprinkle it down first. Just one handful, a good amount. This is rose tone. And remember, I was telling you, it really doesn't matter what fertilizer you buy. This is a 432 instead of the plant tone was a 533. The number variance by 1 or 2 doesn't make a whole lot of difference in your vegetable garden. There are differences, but it's really not important, to be honest with you. Use whatever's on sale. That's when I buy my stuff. Whenever it's well below $2 a pound, I pick up whatever organic granulars on sale. You're going to mix the fertilizer into the top couple inches. That's going to set up the container. And then to that, I'm adding in my compost, combination of compost and peat moss, some organic matter to hold water. Compost is always best to feed the plant. So I will fill that up to the top. So I'm getting down to the bottom of my compost over there, and I'm pulling up some clay. A little bit of clay is fine. It's filled with micronutrients It's great for your plants. You just don't obviously want a ton in there. To finish it off, maybe not a full handful, sprinkle in the organic granular, mix it in 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches deep. And now this container, be it for the vertical tower like this or something like that, is ready to go for the season. Each tier, the GreenStalk tower, has been refreshed. I'm going to stack that. Those little gray dishes on top are the water reservoir. This is a really good system if you're interested in growing vertically. So I'm going to set up this space, and I'll talk about what's going to be in episode 2 of growing in containers and in vertical towers. The container space and the vertical garden space looks pretty good. Almost done. I'm going to finish setting it up. Next episode, I'm going to be trying to do 1 episode a week for the entire 2023 season, if you want to subscribe and follow me. Next video we'll be talking about spinach. That's spinach that overwintered. I already have some peas in. We'll be planting peas, other cool weather crops, and I will show you how to use water soluble fertilizer. So it's really pretty much the beginning of April here. Cool weather crops are good to go in. I'll be talking about soil temperatures, everything you really need to know about growing the cool weather crops in your vertical towers. I did divide out the herbs that were up here, broke the chives into 3, love chives, so I'm going to keep those in there. The rest of these will be potted up with probably lettuce. Can grow a whole tower of lettuce in that little space there. Anyway, looks pretty good. This is a perfect space. It's not too large. If you don't have a lot of land or you only have a little bit of sunlight, you can use containers set up just like this and pretty much have a full garden. I'll show you how to do it. Thanks for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com and please subscribe and follow. I'll show you how to grow everything in here in 2023.